I'm broadcasting.
You're broadcasting now?
Yes.
Yeah,
Do you need help with that? Yeah, I figured it out.
I dropped it in the events as well.
I just want to start like this stuff. Have you had any problems with mighty text not working?
I mean, it.
To get flaky?
Yeah.
Mine's been weird, and I don't know if it's because I'm running Cyanogen or so I uninstalled it.
No, it's got some network issues.
Okay.
Yeah, that's mostly what I run into. I think it's multiple devices. Yeah. Hey, if y'all want to go ahead and grab a seat, we're gonna get started.
It's that game Aruba. Not Steve.
Tim, please stay away from the computer.
Stay away from computers. Don't type in any URL.
We're broadcasting out to the internet. If we don't,
Right. This is on YouTube. Everybody remembers that. I bring it up regularly. Hey, remember when Steve? I have Steve stuck in my head. Remember when Tim embarrassed the universe? Is that a radio machine?
Sun's over there.
I don't know the correct name. I closed that one because I was getting a glare on the screen. Yeah, that's radio.
All right, thanks for coming out, y'all. Can y'all hear me okay? Feels like, I don't know, this room feels bigger tonight. I think it's because there's only 2 rows of chairs. Is that it?
Maybe.
We'll go with that. So thanks for coming out tonight. I'm Jordan. For those of you who don't know me, I see a lot of new faces here, a lot of faces I haven't seen in a long time. Makes me really, really happy. Before we get started, I wanted to say big thank you to Roundsphere and Cellar Labs again for providing us the space and providing us food and keeping us happy. They do a great job of that every month, and we're really thankful for them. Yes. If you're on the social medias, make sure you give them a shout out too. That's what kids do these days, right? They do the social medias. I don't know. Yes, hashtag social media. At social media.
Brandon, gonna make him hashtag or name check Gadget Scouter and stuff around here since I'm giving the talk. Sure. Awesome. At Gadget Scouter.
I'll let you say that when you get up here. All right, so Sean Reed from Roundsphere will be giving the talk tonight. Before we get started, I had a couple of announcements. First off, I finally got around to getting to the notes that we had from the town hall meeting back in January. So starting next month, I want to try out a new format for the meetup where we do one larger talk, 30 to 40-minute talk, and then 2 lightning talks, 5 to 10 minutes. I'm going to be sending out a link for a sign up for lightning talks. So if you think of something at any point and you're interested in just giving like a quick talk on it, we're going to kick off the meetups starting next month with those. So yeah, and it's anything. It doesn't necessarily have to be tech related. Obviously, I think we're all going to respond well to something tech related. But if you want to talk about, for example, the history of Coruscant and Star Wars, not saying I'm going to do that next month or anything. You know, who knows? Who knows? The well, good point. Point is, possibilities are endless. Yes, lots of screaming and running. Wow, that got dark.
We just went super dark and super nerdy at the same
time. Also, I put together a couple of volunteer position descriptions. I'm going to put those out on Meetup and in the Classic City Dev Slack. But basically, from what we talked about and where we want the meetup to go, and what I'm not doing. Basically come up with a position for an events and outreach coordinator, who will work with folks like Cassidy here at Roundsphere and other partner organizations to make sure that we have all our events planned out and handle some of that stuff. And then a talent and social media coordinator to handle the Twitter, Facebook stuff, work on finding speakers and making sure the speakers are set, and things like that. So I'll put those positions up online. And if you're interested in working with the meetup for that, that would be fantastic. Again, it's volunteer, but we're all volunteers here. No one's here under duress, right? Or being paid to be here. Oh, well, I believe that. Yeah. So I'll put those up online. So jobs. Who's hiring? Jonathan?
We have a fall internship co-op position that we will be probably interviewing for in the next couple of weeks. I know I've received some emails from some people, and I haven't replied to you yet because I've been busy working on the summer co-op position. But if you're interested, you can reach out to me and ask me questions. Or you can ask your team.
And in case you don't know who this is Jonathan Wallace from Peachtree Medical Billing.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
That's exactly what.
Anyone else? The usual Roundsphere Cellar Labs?
We're doing pretty well.
Yeah.
Cool.
If you're cool, go talk to Brandon. He might have something for you.
Then talk to Brandon. Yes.
All right. Anyone else? No? Does anyone have any events going on? We just had startup week last week, so I think we're all pretty evented out. Or maybe that's just me. I don't know. I'm projecting. I'm sorry. Does anyone have any events that are coming up that they want to talk about or anything cool?
I'm giving a talk in about 10 minutes.
I'll make sure to miss that. Yeah. No? All right. Y'all are easy tonight. I'm for that. Well, we don't have to wait 10 minutes for Sean to give his talk. Why don't you go ahead and give it right now?
You want to start now?
Yeah, let's go ahead and start
We'll
now.
move that up.
And he's also broadcasting on YouTube and Hangouts, so hopefully people can watch it online.
I should have taken out some ads for it.
I mean,
I don't know that it would do anything. I could make like 10 cents. It'd be like today's on day. All right, hey, what's up? I'm Sean. This is crazy. I almost didn't create a slide explaining who the heck I am because I was like, oh, I know everybody. And then a bunch of people came in and I look out and I go, I know 3 people. So now I'm glad that I made that slide. Briefly, I want to talk. How many people went to Startup Week events last week? Awesome, good few of you. The timing works out really well between that and this talk. I'd like to talk a little bit about the genesis of where this came from. First, the name. Jordan asked me for the name of my talk, and I jokingly said that I was calling it Know Your Enemies. I hadn't come up with something a little more professional yet. Jordan made the joke that he didn't mean name, he meant title, that if I wanted to just call it Steven, that might be strange. Hence, Steve, Know Your Enemy, because when I was replying to him, I mistyped Steven and just wrote Steve. The amusing anecdote to that is that the guy that owned the last company that I worked at before coming over here to Roundsphere was named Steve, and I was a little worried that this talk would get out and he would be like, God, he quits, and then he comes and writes a presentation about me. It has nothing to do with that dude at all. He's not my enemy at all. It just was happenstance. Yeah, so that's Rage Against the Machine, the name of the song that I got stuck in my head when I was thinking about this that made me chuckle. And Comic Sans, the most hated font in the universe. So I figured what a better way to start off than Rage Against Helvetica with Comic Sans. A year ago, maybe 2 now, I was at Web Afternoon Atlanta and I heard a fantastic talk by Greg Hoy, who works at Happy Cog. And he was talking about what designers and developers can learn from the craft brewing industry. And that got me thinking and set my mind kind of jumping off a few things. And there are a couple quotes that you'll see that I've included in here from Greg Hoy, including a link. So I'll put these slides online. And there's a link to the article that he wrote called Collaborate Like a Craft Brewer. And what Greg did was talked about how in the craft brewing industry, it's very much kind of open source. We tend to think of open source as a technological thing, and in this case, craft brewers, particularly there's a great quote from the guy that runs Dogfish, and what he was saying is that anybody that goes out and tries craft beer, he needs for that to be a good experience. So it's in his best interest to share secrets with his competitors, because in doing so, that makes all craft beer good. Because what happens in the industry is that if people go out and they try bad craft beer, they label all craft beer as bad, and then they stick with the larger companies. If they go out and they try one craft beer and it's really good, it makes them more interested in trying other craft beers. And so then craft beers in general continue to get a bigger audience. And so that's why he open sources all of his secrets and actually doesn't worry about trying to shut out competition. So that's kind of where I'm going to go with a lot of this. And I felt like it really resonated with Athens. I've been here since 1994 when I came up here to go to school, and I just never left. And one of the things that I love about Athens is this an endless creative community. There's just a vibe here that you don't really get anywhere else, and I love that about it. One of the things that I hate about it is that there are also a lot of tiny little fiefdoms and a lot of places that get into pissing contests with other places where we have a very small community, but this side won't talk to this side because they might be doing something and they want to be the only person to do it and they want all of the glory, and so they kind of hog it, and it really becomes sort of a closed source type of lifestyle. And in a town this size, as I hope to explain as I'm going through this, I think it benefits all of us if we all work together and we didn't get so mixed up on being the biggest fish in this pond, because I think there are bigger ponds to get involved in. So now let's jump into a little more of the serious stuff. Shameless plug. Before I get into the actual talk, I will be teaching a class before Athens, and then we'll be launching this class online about atomic design and building design pattern systems. I'm going to go back. My remote did not work, so I'm trying this with my phone, so I'm probably going to be bouncing between slides like crazy because I'm a spaz and I'm shaking my phone. So I will be teaching class 3 for Athens and releasing it online. It will be focused on front-end development, creating design systems and design patterns. The reason why I say moving beyond Bootstrap, anybody who has actually had the chance to talk to me, I will go on for hours about why I hate Bootstrap and that it's used everywhere. But it does do some good things, and the important takeaways from Bootstrap can actually be applied to whatever project you're working on. So I'm going to be teaching that class, so shameless plug for myself. Also, shout out to Kylie Sawhill, who came up with the logo for me in like 2 minutes based on a really crappy design. So we're definitely lucky that we get to work with her here all the time. So who am I? Sean R. Reed. Sean and Roundsphere. What?
Poster.
Yeah. I got it from Tim Doyle. It's out of frame. Rad.
I had that sticker on my truck.
I know. You did the poster, but I got it right before it went, right before he stopped printing them. There are still a few places. Like, do a Google search for Tim Doyle. All right, continue. All right. So I'm a front-end developer here at Roundsphere. I've been here since September. Most of last year, I was actually a freelancer, did some work with Asigo and Axon and Mono and a bunch of different companies here in town. Finally settled down at Roundsphere. I work on the Book Scouter team. We make Book Scouter and Gadget Scouter. Those are business-to-consumer products, price comparison websites. If you're selling a used book or a used gadget, we'll show you, rather than you having to go to 20, 30 different places to find out who's going to buy your product and how much, you tell us what you've got, and we'll tell you who's buying it and how much they're buying it for. So that's what I work on, and I deal primarily with JavaScript, UI, UX, those sorts of things, making things useful for the client, and those are the kind of things that I will be talking about in the Learn Atomic Design course. Spazzy hands, here we go. So front-end developer, also a wrestling announcer. I announce for an independent pro wrestling organization out of Porterdale, Georgia. That's not important until a few slides later, but I threw it in there. And a former cheerleading coach, which legit, I was a cheerleader at the University of Georgia in the late 90s and coached cheerleading for just shy of 10 years of my life. Also will come up later, and that's why I bothered to put it in there. Steve is obnoxious. Don't be Steve. I just put this in there because we had, Steve, know your enemy. And I just tried to find the most obnoxious picture. I'm a little bummed because that's actually a dancing GIF that I've been staring at all day, and it has been driving me nuts. It apparently doesn't keep dancing in the presentation. I told you, all over the place. Anybody here know the X-Men? All right, Cyclops. So as I was coming up with what I wanted to get started with and where I wanted to begin this whole talk, kind of the entry point for this, I was thinking about the concept of vision, and I needed a good image to get to what I was talking about. Thought about using Vision from Avengers. Anybody that's seen Age of Ultron knows who that is now. Was a D-list character that's now very popular. And if you're a lifelong comic book fan like me, that's a little Bizarro, who is also another comic book character that you've probably never heard of. Cyclops, for those of you that don't know, he is a mutant. He shoots laser beams from his eyes, essentially. Wears special glasses, ruby irradiated glasses, to be exact, to make sure that he keeps those beams under control. And when I'm thinking about the concept of vision, this kind of worked, because here's the thing. If Cyclops isn't paying a whole lot of attention and makes things a little too broad, there is a lot of room for collateral damage. He's shooting laser beams out of his eyes. A little too high, a little too low, and this boat is dead, and he's trying to take out that guy. At the same time, if he's too narrow with his vision, he's about as effective as those guys. For those of you non-Star Wars fans, those are stormtroopers. They miss constantly. Never hit their target. So vision becomes important when you're working on a company, when you're working on a product. You've got to think about what you're doing. You have to think about what your company vision is. You have to think about what your vision is for your product. Too broad, and there may be collateral damage that you're not expecting. Too narrow, and you may miss opportunities. And so that's something that's really important, which leads us to cheerleading. Those are all teams that I coach. That's me, that's me, that's me. I'm hiding in the back there. This is roughly circa 2000, 2001, way before I had a beard. And I was a little thinner in the belly, and I could hold people over my head. This team was the varsity team. I'm going to talk about them, but first I want to talk about what is involved in coaching competitive cheerleading. How many people here are project managers in any regard, or have done project management? So you're familiar with the concept of a lot of moving parts, right? You should, maybe. Coaching competitive cheerleading, you have literal moving parts. They're called people, and you have 16 of them at a maximum on the floor. And they're not only people, they're high school kids. And I don't know if you've ever dealt with high school kids, but they're a very unique kind of people. And one of the most important things when you're putting these routines together is the reason why we have uniforms, the reason why we dictate how the kids dress is because we need them to look very similar. We need them to work as a unit. We need 16 high school aged children to behave as a single unit, doing things like flipping and throwing people up in the air and holding them over their heads. You kind of see how this is precarious at best. It's one thing for me to do this by myself. Then it's just me and the young lady that I'm holding over my head. I've been doing that forever. The margin of error is a lot lower. These kids had been doing it for a few months. So the margin of error of all three of these hitting at the exact same time and all of these poses being exactly the way they should, because we're getting scored on it, is really difficult. And getting high school kids to get along is even more difficult. Sometimes they come in and they have a bad day. And we're trying to get ready for a competition, and the collaboration is completely non-existent. So I did a lot of learning about organizing and keeping control, as much as I could have control, or the illusion of control, over a lot of different moving parts in order to be really successful. I'm pleased to say that of the teams that I coached, we quite often, I don't think we ever finished outside the top 5. Frequently, we were 1 or 2. I was the head coach of the JV competition team. At my busiest time of year, I was the head coach of an 8th grade team that did both competition and basketball, meaning they cheered during basketball games. If you want to know what the 3rd level of hell is, it's 8th grade basketball games. I also was the head coach for the junior varsity football cheerleading. That's the 2nd level of hell. And the head coach of the junior varsity competition squad, and the assistant coach for varsity football cheerleading and varsity competition. So at my busiest, I was coaching or assistant coaching one of 6 squads, working with probably 40 plus kids.
there was some overlap between some of the squads. So spent a lot of time working on personalities, a lot of time working on coordination, a lot of time trying to make sure that the seniors didn't yell at the freshmen and make them feel bad, so that when we went out there to compete, this girl in the middle was just going to drop that girl on her head because she thought she was being mean. If you've seen the movie Mean Girls, that struggle is real. The interesting thing, when I started coaching, I was a few years removed from having done some independent coaching. So I was working at gyms and I was teaching students. So one-on-one, lots of small group stuff. I hadn't quite worked with a full squad yet. And I was only a few years removed from cheerleading myself. So I had a little bit of experience. I knew a lot of the mechanics. I knew some of the basics. But I had not had an entire team to myself. I was not used to working on team dynamics. I was not used to dealing with parents who, to be perfectly honest, are way worse than the kids. So parents, keep that in mind. When your kids become high school age, don't be worse than the kids. It's a very low bar. You'll be able to clear it. I know you will. So I came in, and I was working with that gentleman right there in the tie, and then that is his wife. They're Rob and Molly Spencer, both University of Georgia cheerleaders. Rob himself, an entrepreneur, started one of the first cheerleading training centers here in Athens, and really in the country, called United Cheerleading. Knows his stuff. By the time I came in, he had been coaching for 13 years, had multiple state championships under his belt, knew exactly what he was doing. But me, in my early 20s, thinking I was hot stuff, came in and thought, he's old. He's old school. I'm coming in. He's wrong, clearly. He's been doing it too long. Everything's too outdated. He's missing, he's missing the boat. He doesn't have the fresh eyes that I have. He's been staring at it too long and too closely. With that varsity team, our goal was to win state. Winning state is a little tricky. It's really not easy to do. You have regionals and sectionals, and there are a few different layers that you have to go through. And cheerleading is set up the same way as gymnastics. If you've ever been to a gymnastics meet, it's done by a panel of judges, and you're given a score. So it's super subjective. It's not like basketball or football where you have an objective, goal. Cross the goal line with the ball, you get points. No, it's really up to what the judges say. So there are a lot of variables, a lot of things that you can't determine, a lot of things you can't control. And Rob had those things wired. He really did. He and his wife, Molly, they knew this system really well. And he came out and he said, we're going to win state. That was his vision. His vision for that team was, we're going to win state this year. We're going to beat, everybody effectively. And in my head, I thought, well, that's just crazy. Let's get a few small wins under the belt. Let's focus on winning a few, a regional or a few invitationals. More importantly, Chattahoochee was the school that had won the previous year, so let's just focus on beating them once. Let's make sure that we can beat them once, and then we'll focus on state. My vision was too narrow. I was missing the point. I thought Rob's was too broad. But Rob, again, coming from 13 years experience, he knew what he was doing. He knew exactly what he was doing. And this is actually the state championship ring that we got because we did win. And written on the side is 50-1. And what that means is we competed against 51 teams, and we placed above 50 of them. So that means we got first place in every competition we went to except for one. And more importantly, we got first place at state, and we ended up winning the state championship. And I quickly realized, A, learn from your elders. If you're working with a guy that's been doing it for 13 years, then they know what they're talking about. So that taught me to shut up and pay attention. Don't come in and think that it's time for the young blood to take over and run the show. I was trying to establish my little fiefdom. I was having my pissing contest. This is my corner. This is what I'm going to do. And my way is going to be the right way. And you'll see, and I was wrong on just about every count. And we have the results to show for it. Thankfully, I got myself corrected and it did well by the kids, and my teams is very successful. And it is almost entirely because of the lessons that I learned. I learned to collaborate. I learned to listen. Now I sound like Vanilla Ice. For anybody who doesn't, that's a rapper from the 80s. So I learned some very important lessons, and it's been interesting over the course of my life. Cheerleading, like I said, was something I did for about 10 years. I coached it for about 10 years. I cheered for about 4. So it took a very long period in my life. And it's funny how often little strange lessons, like organizing a room full of kids and getting them to all think like a team, comes into play. And when I was freelancing last year, I found so many applicable lessons to things that had nothing to do with cheerleading, but they were just general things that I learned while I was working on that. So, Rage Against the Machine, back again. Know your enemy. This is a little more intense. So, know your enemy. What does that mean? Obviously, my vision being way too narrow, I thought the enemy was this one school. Rob knew that the enemy in this particular instance was ourselves. He knew that if this team of kids could get over themselves, if they could get over being focused and having a narrow focus on, can we beat the team that won last year? Because that's not the enemy. We have a goal, and beating that team doesn't matter. If you beat that team in an invitational, you don't win state. Your enemy is all the other teams that you're facing at state. And because it's a subjective sport, it's not like anybody comes in with any sort of advantage. You're all on the level playing field on that day when you're all competing. So the enemy is not that one team. And if you're focused on that one team, you're going to miss it. And you're going to end up being very short-sighted. You're going to be a stormtrooper. And if you focus too much, particularly when you're dealing with high school kids, you're going to stress them out and they're going to shut down. And they're going to look at all the teams that are competing against them and they're going to say, I can't beat that team. We can't beat that team. And then they're not going to. It'll become a self-fulfilling prophecy. So you can't be too broad. So you have to know who your enemy is. Moving on with the random slides, that's Real Big Fish. Ska band, kind of a third wave ska band. Why the hell did I choose this? Primarily because I looked up images of big fish in small ponds, and they were all dumb, and I hated them. So I went with a picture of Real Big Fish. Because gets the point across, and it's a non sequitur, and I love non sequiturs. So Tom, Mr. Tom Morello, tell us, what are we looking at? Well, Sean, what we're looking at is a map of Georgia, and the red star, the red and black, is Athens, Georgia, and those ugly Georgia Tech colors is Atlanta, Georgia. I'd say probably right now 2 of the bigger tech hubs in the state, maybe the only tech hubs. I have no idea what's happening in like Columbus or Macon, and that star just blocks out Marietta like it doesn't even exist. But I tried to make the stars relative to the population. Atlanta's population is about 4 times larger than Athens. And yet together, we're still not that large. And the current population of Georgia is about 10 million for the entire state. Found this report, relatively recent. Silicon Valley, its population hit 3 million. So Silicon Valley, just that general area, is about the third of the size of Georgia. Way bigger than even Athens and Atlanta combined. So, as Zach De La Roca is asking, and he would probably yell it, I'm not going to do that because I love my voice, but he's saying, are you in the right pond? And more importantly, does that even matter? Does it matter what pond you're in? Do you care? Who is your enemy? Who are you working against? So I was like, well, how do we solve this? How do we come up? I need something good at science-y. So Isaac Asimov, right? Good science-y guy. Wrote in this book, Robots of Dawn, about, you can have some guy, how many people, developers, we do this a lot. You sit in a room and you bang your head off the wall, trying to fix this one problem, on it, hours. Send it over to a friend, like, oh yeah, you missed a comma. And it's like 10 minutes. You're like, son of a... This happens to me regularly. There are plenty of times where my pride gets the best of me and I'm working on an issue, and if I would have just walked down the hall and talked to Joe or talked to one of the guys over here and said, hey, can you look at this? What am I missing? And they would find it because you can stare at it for far too long. But this is science fiction, right? It's robots. Let's get into something I know a little bit more about. Let's talk about metal. Corey Taylor, lead singer of Slipknot, Stone Sour, any metal fans? Where's Parsons when I need it? One other metal fan. There we go, Tim. There we go. Get a couple in the front row. I kind of love this quote, and the parts that I made bold. This is very true. In the sort of metal fandom, a rising tide really does lift all boats, and it is kind of awesome. As he says, we are collectively kind of treated like the bastard stepchildren of the rest of the music world. It's one of those things people have been telling me for years. I'm 40, that eventually I'll grow out of liking heavy metal, and they're wrong. Clearly. It's something you're born into, not to grow out of. But there is, so when you see a band like Ghost, who got Best Heavy Metal Grammy, and the Grammys are really a joke, but Ghost is really amazing. And so I was like, yes, this is awesome. Not that I really so much care about the Grammy, but that this awesome band Ghost was on the Grammys, and they got exposed to a bunch of people that they normally wouldn't have. Mastodon, a band who from Atlanta, I actually went to high school with one of the guys in the band, getting on the national stage, getting nominated for Grammys. And what's awesome is that a metal band will get this kind of notification. Somebody like Corey Taylor, who has sung with a million different bands, done a million different things, and they kind of lift everybody else up. And they're not trying to push down somebody else, because they're like, oh, well, you're in a metal band and I'm in a metal band, and there's only so many fans, so I'm gonna try to push you down and push us up. No, they're like, let's make more metal fans. Let's expand on that. However, there are like 3-4 metal fans in the room, so let's go a little closer. And this is from Greg Boyd. This is from the Collaborate Like a Craft Brewer talk. And I think the most important part is this. How many people know what Happy Cog is? Are you familiar with Happy Cog? Oh man, now I feel old. Happy Cog is a design agency started by Greg and Jeffrey Zeldman, based out of New York, New Jersey area. Zeldman's no longer there, but if you have heard the name Jeffrey Zeldman, you know that he is sort of the godfather of web standards. The fact that when we design websites and there are a few little weird things about different browsers and cross browsers, but it's not nearly as bad as it was in the dark times in the early 2000s, in the way back. When you actually had legit different tags, like the fact that there's now standardized HTML syntax that works across browsers, and that even IE has caught up, that's Jeffrey Zeldman. He started that ball rolling. He made that a reality. Getting to the point where we are today with things like React and and the front end frameworks, and the ability to even really have the true separation of concerns between front end and back end. That all started with the guys in those early days that were pushing for the web standards, that were pushing what you could do with HTML, that were making the browser manufacturers, holding them responsible to update these things so that they all played nicely together. So you didn't have a guy that just built for IE or somebody that just built for Netscape. For the young kids, Netscape is a browser that doesn't exist anymore. It lost the browser. This was before Chrome, way back. So Greg Coy was a part of that. He's been in this game for a very long time. He was part of the company that was making some major changes. And it was an absolute pleasure to get to see him speak and get to hear him talk about this stuff and hear him tell other designers, like, hey, people are doing really, really cool things out there. And Happy Cog, if they wanted to, they could stand on their pedestal, they could wave their flag, and they could say, we created all this. So you all do what we say. And they would have every right to do that. They have the pedigree. They have the people in the system that have been in the industry, rather, to stand there and say that and be legit about it. But they're not doing that. They're saying, hey, what are you doing? They're looking at, they're the coach with 13 years experience looking at the new kid coming in that thinks he has all the answers and saying, well, what are you doing? What is some interesting thing that you have going on? What can I learn from you? How can I make sure that we're building the next generation and not the previous generation? And you do it by working together. You do it by collaborating. We have a lot of great companies here in Athens. And it's always amusing when I talk to Jordan and he and I, we collaborate with this person or talk to this person or talk to this person. And the number of different companies that, I may have written a snippet of software for, or that's helped me fix something in software that I'm writing. And these aren't companies that, Vestigo and Book Scouter, we couldn't be more different. One is all about going outdoors, and we're all about selling used books. They couldn't be more different. And yeah, if we wanted to, we could try to hire, Roundsphere could go and try to hire every developer in town. We have all the developers, and we have all of our products, but that doesn't really do much for Athens. It's great for Roundsphere, but what does it do for Athens? What does it do for that little tiny star? And really, does that even help us be that competitive? And it definitely doesn't help put Athens on the map, and it's not going to attract more developers here. We could just hoard them all, but then we have that. But then who else is going to want to come? Developers and developer talent and designers will want to come to Athens if Athens has a lot of different options. Silicon Valley is Silicon Valley. It has 3 million people because there are so many different companies that really, if you just have a dream that you want to go and either start a company or work for a startup, or you've got this crazy idea, you can move to Silicon Valley and probably find somebody that will pay for it, that's already doing it, or will give you a job. That's what we want for Athens. We want people to come here. I am very guilty of getting into the pissing contest and being like, we don't need anybody to go to Atlanta. Don't go to Atlanta. Atlanta sucks. I really believe that. I really don't like Atlanta. But at the same time, Atlanta Tech Village is doing really cool stuff. ATDC is doing really cool stuff. Forming partnerships with those guys allows us to have a better community. It allows Georgia and the 500,000, the just over 500,000 population of these two cities to compete with the 3 million in Silicon Valley and be able to be, put on the map and give people a choice so they can stay here so they don't have to go to Silicon Valley. Because it's all about knowing who your enemy is. In this town, the enemy is not the company down the street. Usually, it's something bigger than that. More specifically, let's talk about facing off. That's me in my wrestling announcer attire. For those of you that don't watch professional wrestling, which I don't understand.
That's probably everyone.
Probably everyone. Hulk Hogan, right? Okay. What I do is I wear a suit. I dress like this for work. I wear a suit to announce wrestling. Makes total sense.
Why aren't you wearing that tonight?
Because that's uncomfortable as hell. Wrestling is like equal parts theater and sports. And so what I do is I'm the guy that gets to stand in the ring. And I say stuff like, in this corner, weighing in at 230 pounds, coming from the great state of wherever, or one of the fellows has kind of a weird gimmick. So I say, from the edges of reality, now coming to the ring, it's Trevor Aeon. And I do like crazy sounding voices. So that's me doing that, and that lines up well because in this corner we have, founded in 1994, one of the longest companies here in Athens, Georgia, Jittery Joe's Coffee, and founded in 2002, one of the oldest breweries here in Athens, Georgia, Terrapin Breweries. Their opponents, founded in 2006, Thousand Faces Coffee, and Creature Comforts, who I think was founded somewhere around 2012. So natural, right? Seems to make sense. We're coffee roasters. So naturally, Jittery Joe's, who's been here for a while, they've been here as long as I have, they've got to compete with Thousand Faces Coffee, right? They need to be big dog. They've got to be the coffee company. And Terrapin and Creature Comforts, man, they need to go. It's head to head. It's the Jets and the Sharks, or what is that from? West Side Story, right? Wrong. Press your luck whammies. None of you know what this is. A few of you do. There you go. Press your luck whammies. Wrong answer. They're not competing with each other. Coffee, Thousand Faces, Jittery Joe's. You know who they're competing with? Keurig. Keurig's doing $2.5 billion in sales. They're beating out Starbucks. Folgers, Starbucks, Max Miles, Dunkin' Donuts. Right? That's your Thousand Faces and Jittery Joe's is competing with. That's the enemy. Facing off against each other just means we lose one more really good coffee roaster, just so that one could be the big fish in Athens, Georgia. Same thing with Creature Comforts. These are the top 10 recently, and there's not a single craft brewer on there. Period. End of story. That's the top 10, and that's in millions of dollars in sales. So Bud Light's doing about $5 billion. Heineken's doing $4 billion. I think my math is right. I don't know. I have an English degree, so don't quote me on that. But yeah, so I guarantee you, these 4 companies combined are not doing the kind of revenue to compete with the 5th place position in any of those. These companies crappy Bud Light. Shitty Heineken. Tastes like horse urine. That's who Creature Comforts and Terrapin is competing with. I've never actually had horse urine. I just imagine that's what Heineken tastes like. And I'm really bitter that they bought Rolling Rock. So, because Rolling Rock used to be this nice little small brewing company. So this is the enemy. This is who you're competing with. So it's in, just like the quote from Dogfish, it's in the best interest of these two guys. Don't be the biggest in Athens. Athens has 100,000 people in it. Even if you sold a case to everybody, you still only, I mean, in that 100,000, that's like kids and newborns. That's not 100,000 people that are all 21 and able to drink. So even if you sold it to everybody in Athens, your numbers are still going to be pretty paltry. So you want to get to Atlanta. You want to get to the bigger cities. You want to get outside of here. You want to be from here, and you want to give back to here, but they're going to get a lot further collaborating and working. The companies that we're starting here, the companies that we're at Startup Week, the stories that we heard, they're all going to go a lot further by working together and knowing who their enemy is. Umano is, they make t-shirts. Ultimately, their end product is t-shirts. Any of the Red Dress Boutique, any of the clothing stores downtown, particularly the ones that are catering to women. One of like the number one women's, or one of the top, it's not number one, but one of the top women's clothing companies, they just moved in, Urban Outfitters. That's who these people are competing with. Target for affordable stuff. That's who they're competing with. It doesn't make any sense for Harry's to try to put Red Dress out of business. It makes more sense for those who work together so that there's a bustling economy for the products that they are making. It makes sense for Umano to try to get their t-shirts on as many kids as possible, or get their t-shirts sold and they can help as many kids as possible. They need to get beyond Athens, Georgia. They can be from Athens, Georgia, and they can take advantage of all of the things that we have in Athens, Georgia. But if all the developers said, oh, we don't have time to work on that. You're on Shopify, we don't want to mess with Shopify. We have got our own thing, and that's all we're worried about. And we didn't offer them any help with those sorts of things, and that company's not going to grow. And that's going to be one less company that's going to be able to hire that many fewer people that are going to bring into town so that suddenly our town of 100,000 can grow and become 300, 400,000. And then our infrastructure can go with it, and we can actually make decisions to help grow the economy in this city, that grows the economy in this state, that grows the economy in this region. And I think you know where I'm going with that. So in closing, another quote from Greg Hoy, and really says it better than I could. Go out, meet people, see what they're doing. There are a lot of people doing a lot of really cool things. And we'll all benefit from talking to all of those people. If we shelter ourselves, lock ourselves in, this is how I write, this is what I do. I only use this framework, I only use that, or I only use this. I don't touch a lot of bleeding edge software. I'm old. I've been doing it for a long time. I've been cut. It's called bleeding edge for a reason. But at the same time, that doesn't mean I'm not going to go out and look at it. I'm going to talk to somebody and be like, wow, that's awesome. This is something that's cool. And it's either going to make me rethink how I'm using what I'm using, or it's going to make me rethink about using that thing because it might be ready for prime time. And we can share that information. If everybody just hoards it, none of us go anywhere. And we basically just become really big fish in really tiny ponds. And the problem with that is eventually you run out of water. That's where I'll leave it. Because that's about as profound as I'm going to get tonight with talking about water. Like I said, I'll put this online with these links. You can read Collaborate Like a Craft Brewer. And the CEO of Dogfish actually wrote a book. And so I'm linking to that as well. That was linked out of Greg Hoy's article. And that's it for me.
Questions?
I may not have answers, but I'll be more than happy to make some up.
Really? No one has any questions for Sean?
I speak a million miles an hour, so they're probably still trying to figure out what the hell I just said. Yeah, Ben.
So you mentioned that
to sort of gain knowledge and share knowledge between people who are really thing. What do you do when you're in a situation where you're working with somebody who isn't receptive to criticism or knowledge sharing? Good idea.
Face punches. I can let you borrow my ring. It's heavy. No, I don't advocate that. I don't know. I don't have a good answer for that. You're always going to have personality conflicts, and there are going to be those people that aren't really open and sharing. And you may also have people that are super, super introverted and just don't like talking to people. I have my days where I'm like that. Those of you that came to my mental health talk know I'm a bit of a manic, not manic fella. So some of that is just people's personalities, and there's really, if there's a solution for that, I would market that product and I'd retire. But I think a lot of it is what I usually do is if I find somebody that sort of seems difficult or not receptive, I'll do my best to try to find a common ground or a way that I can talk to them or a way that I can relate to them. And sometimes you just have to stand your ground and you have to be like, look, we're sharing, damn it. And that's all there is to it. And I'm going to play the dictator that dictates that we're sharing. A lot of it too comes from company culture. I will say, I think we have a great company culture of just bouncing things around and sharing and information like that. So that works out well. But, each person's going to be a little bit different. So I don't even know that there really is sort of a one size fits all way to, that's probably somebody that didn't share in kindergarten. They didn't learn those lessons. But I don't really have a good answer for that.
Yeah, I would say it's almost something that can be taught and learned.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think the first time you encounter somebody who's open for sharing, you'll probably approach it with some hesitancy. But the more you're exposed to it, you're like, oh, this is like a real thing, honest thing, that perhaps I will engage in. So I think like being repetitive.
And I think some of it has to do with your presentation. Like if you just bounce it, you're like, hey, how you doing? I want to show you all my stuff. Like that's probably going to freak somebody out. So a lot of it is just sort of figuring out where personalities line up.
Do you guys do code review?
Yes.
I was about to say,
Like if you're
code
not
review
interested in personal interaction,
Yeah.
like code review software.
Yeah, code review can be contentious too if you introduce it like, hey, why'd you do it this way? It's like if that's your entree into a conversation, you're gonna get shut down. It's I found in my job, like code review is really helpful as long as it's handled, with maturity. But yeah, it's hard to. I mean, if there's people who are truly like Asperger's level, it's hard to draw them out unless you get. I found one technique is you get very specific. So the code review is helpful because if you get someone talking about a problem that they solve, that's a very that usually draws people out.
Yeah, sometimes a question is better than like, hey, you should do it this way, or why did you do it this way?
Yeah.
I would say in general, I've learned on the old part is you probably should just never judge anyone's code. You never know why people did things. I mean, some people are actually terrible at their jobs, but most people are usually like they make mistakes or do things poorly because of like they basically didn't have time to do it right. They're under pressure. So I learned not to
You
judge.
can totally judge Tim's code though.
You
'Cause
may judge
he
mine.
writes action script, so
Yes. Yeah.
Wait, I thought we weren't supposed to like action script versus the other languages.
Now I'm
No,
shutting
with
down,
Tim.
Sean. Now
With-
I'm shutting down.
now
I'm not gonna have this conversation with you.
Tim and I used to work in the same office space, so I get to pick on this is our relationship. We pick on each other. This is Tim. Yes. Tim, I should have named this Tim. Know your enemy. Yeah, Jonathan.
So I really liked your talk. I find it inspiring. I like the history because I didn't actually know about Greg Ford, which I feel a little ashamed of admitting. But you talked about, you sort of saying, hey, expand your context of like the way I interpreted it, you're expanding your context of who we're competing against, and we're competing against as a unit on the regional level and the city level and the state level. So I guess my question is, did you have any thoughts as to what you feel that we as a city should do to be more competitive at each of those levels. That is a big question.
Yeah, well, the as a city part is, again, it's one of those things that being in Athens as long as I have, that has frustrated me, because the cities, when you get to the city government level, they're some of the worst about being very opaque and making it really difficult to get a lot of things done. I know Jim has run into that. I think probably one of the biggest things that we've seen is For Athens and what For Athens has done. Jim has essentially turned water to wine, because what he's been able to do in the last 6 years, is something that I never thought was possible. Even where I used to work at the university, and the university tech sector was very they were all over the place. Nobody kind of we all had the same employer, and we all were running the same systems, and we were all running into the same problems, and yet everybody was very isolated, and there was no sort of feeling of team union. He's like, yeah, I work in the university now. It's exactly like that. And so I didn't really know, the concept of doing that on a citywide level was the university can't do it, then it can't be done anywhere else. And so watching what For Athens has been able to do and seeing all the companies, Startup Week last week was super inspiring.
Let me scope it down, because I realize I made a monster question.
Mhm.
4 or 5 presentations. What should I do as an individual to help compete in community clubs? What's the action item that I could walk away with?
I would say our enemy as a community is apathy.
Yeah.
We've got to get people involved and get them to care. I think that's it, because I think when y'all come here, you start to care. Even if you're not here every single month or whatever, you care enough to keep up with it. And I think that's really the biggest thing. Collaboration is a process. It's not a one-time thing.
Yeah. Well, and really, Jonathan, to a certain extent, you've already done it, because you started this meetup that has now grown to this.
It's all your fault.
So you kicked this snowball down the hill.
I was actually talking to Jim today. My name is Josh, and I'm not a colleague. And one of the things, I don't come to a lot of these, but one of the things I asked Jim is, I'm one of the people who's constantly driving to Atlanta. I'm always taking the Atlanta jobs. I'm sorry. Unfortunately, I'm not anymore. I'm looking for one. So anybody? Anyway, what I asked Jim today was, I wonder how many more of me are there in Athens. I've been writing for 15 years.
Yeah, there's probably quite a bit.
So, how do we get them out? Is it apathy? For me, it's not apathy. It's the fact that I'm driving to Atlanta every single day. So I'm not getting home until 7 o'clock, whatever. So I think that trying to reach out to some of those people, I don't know how. I'm just making stuff up right now. I'm not offering solutions.
But to be honest, even throwing the question out there, because a lot of it, I think, if people that are going to Atlanta every day don't know that we exist, we almost certainly don't know that they exist. So you bringing that up in a forum like this says, oh, hey, maybe we should think on that.
Today,
Yeah.
Is the company I was working for was a startup, and it was actually local, and funding is no longer there. But it was is there anything even in Athens? That's the question I was asking. And yeah, there is, surprisingly. There's quite a bit, but I never would have thought. I've been going to interviews in Atlanta all week, just because I assume there's nothing here.
Right.
I wonder how many of you are out there.
Billboard on 316.
Yeah, billboard.
You're going the wrong way.
Well, and I know I know the Athens Made initiative is picking back up, right? Isn't Richie Athens Made? Yeah. And so I think that's something that could really help make things. I think, doing things like I found out about Roundsphere and the stuff that was going on here because of the hackathon last year. That actually was timed right when I had quit my other job that was based out of Alpharetta. And so the idea of even working with a company here, I quit that job because I couldn't handle it anymore. I was unhappy and I needed to do something else. And so I was like, I'm just going to go freelance. But then I came to the hackathon. I was like, oh, geez, Roundsphere, mouse signing, that's a thing. That's cool. And then getting involved in For Athens and working with Vestigo and Axon and all those other companies that basically helped keep me from being homeless. mine was a bit of an extreme case, but there are, so some of the question is, how do we promote those kinds of events to people that don't come to things like this? How do we expand that scope? And I don't know that we have answers to that yet, because again, For Athens is only 5 or 6 years old. Roundsphere's been, how long has Roundsphere been in Athens, Brandon? Yeah. So I mean, relatively speaking, they're still it's all very young companies. And so a lot of it is like,
I mean, going back to a specific case, hopefully the companies that are here have job postings on where you might look for job postings
Mhm.
or might have.
Surprisingly, they don't.
Well, Athens has.
You know, I mean, if I go to the For Athens website, yes.
right.
But if I hit any of the other major,
You're looking on Indeed or.
DICE, Indeed, Career Builder, I mean, you know,
Maybe there's opportunity for some combined sort of resources there. I think, pretty sure we got things on, at least Indeed, I don't know about DICE and a few other.
Yeah, I found you guys on LinkedIn, so,
Hopefully, I mean, maybe there's a better, I'm a part of a group that's trying to collaborate and make that a little bit thing, so I'll see if I can bring that up there.
yeah, I mean, because, you know, I definitely, if I saw anything in Athens, it would be, okay, well, I'm gonna apply that, I don't really care what it is, just for the simple fact of being here.
Yeah, so we've actually started a thing for that, we haven't gotten very far on it, so I'm trying to make this a website that's like, it's like Athens Tech Jobs. Or Athens is kind of that, so I don't really know if it's different from that or not, but.
I mean, it honestly didn't occur to me to even look at For Athens until Jim mentioned
We
it.
may not know what Athens is if you haven't been around the tech scene a little bit. So,
Yeah.
Maybe some sort of combined account where you push that to DICE or.
Yeah.
Whatever too. So, there's an initiative called Athens Talent Partnership that me and Jonathan and the other people are part of that bring that up. Next time we meet. So that's one thing. The other thing that I would say that goes actually outside this room is like all these companies that are starting up here they're maybe tech companies, but they have positions that are not tech positions. So customer support, marketing, sales, all that kind of stuff. If you all know about, maybe instead of just advertising our tech positions, we could list off some of those as well. Because that definitely reaches outside of the media tech community. Just having some general knowledge or sharing some of those are probably useful because everybody knows people in those other fields as well.
And if you have specific ideas on how this group can help that, there's a volunteer position for you.
I will say it's been really exciting to see how much this group has grown and to see new faces. Like, it's totally awesome. God, I'm so 80s. It's totally awesome to see a room full of faces that that I don't know or that I haven't seen before, which is fantastic. I mean, the group has really come quite a long way from when Jonathan started it a couple of years ago when we were meeting upstairs in the club. And Jess, and Jess Brown, who's not here. We're not going to mention him because he's not here.
No. You always mention Jess.
I know, I'm kidding. But yeah, you know, and it's just watching it grow where it was just a small, like probably dozen of us that were like, we're tired of driving to Atlanta.
They get like 23.
Did we? Yeah, maybe 2 dozen.
Over 20.
Yeah.
But if Athens becomes the size of Atlanta, how will that affect my commute from the east side?
Gina asking the important.
Virtual offices and flexible schedule. Or what is the Hyperloop? What is Hyperloop? Hyperloop from the east side. Can we get that run out to Bethlehem where I am, and then I can just Hyperloop there?
Infrastructure moves quickly in Georgia.
Right. Look, if we have more people, we can push for that.
Oh, that's cute.
I know. Let me have my pipe dream while I feel good. No, it doesn't. No. Atlanta's a traffic nightmare.
Do you have any more questions for Sean?
Any more questions I can't really answer? Well, make something up.
He has the life of the universe and everything.
42.
Yeah, but what is that?
Oh, yeah, no. It's all very Buddhist of you.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for coming out. I think Jonathan's going to talk next month. I think we're finally going to.
I keep threatening to talk, and then other people volunteer, so I think that's like my way of helping out. So I'm going to give a talk.
All right. So Jonathan. Well, so here's the thing. We don't have anyone lined up, so if